Superintendent.
Good evening, everybody. It's 7:30. Let's get the meeting underway. This is the Planning Commission's regular meeting, City of Farmington Hills, June 16, 2022. It is 7:30. You are in Farmington Hills City Hall, calling the meeting to order. Roll call, everybody's here, but Mr. Stimson's absent. We do have the approval of the agenda with one amendment. The first item is in our agenda referenced as Lot Split 2 of 2022. It should be amended to read Lot Split 1 of 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda with the amendment?
So moved.
John, second by Barry. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we're into regular business. So the first item is, in fact, the lot split 1 of 2022. Location is 29700 Belfast. The proposal is split parent parcel into two parcels in an RA3 one-family residential district. Action requested is lot split approval. Ryan Zebek, owner and applicant. Joe, are you going to do the presentation on the intro?
Yes, I can go through my letters here.
Thank you.
So yes, we are at 29,700 Belfast Street. And when you look at this, and the properties around it, there are kind of 4 properties in a row that have the same size on Belfast Street, and then this one is, or 3 rather than 4. This is the one that we're looking at, and they're proposing to split it into 2 right down the middle. It's zoned RA3. So the 2 parcels that would be remaining would each have 106 feet of frontage on Belfast, and they'd each be 61,044.8 square feet, or 1.4 acres. And that would meet the standards of our ordinance. Property's currently vacant. There's a branch of the Rouge River that runs through it. It separates the lower third of the property that fronts on Belfast from the other 2/3 of the property, which are north of the river, and therefore inaccessible at the moment. And then the site is part of the Brookside Park subdivision. When we look at the properties surrounding it, we have almost entirely RA3 zoning surrounding it. You have some open space from Grand River Homes to the north, single family to the south. The west parcel to the west is vacant, and then to the east, you've got a single-family home, and then some multifamily on RC3 zoning up at the north end of the property. So when we get into the dimensional standards of the RA3 district, we see that the lot size is fine, the lot width is fine. There aren't any existing structures that would cause problems with setbacks or anything like that on the property once it was split. The one thing that we do see, though, is that the depth to width ratio is required to be 4:1. And because of the depth of this parcel, we wind up with 2 lots with a 5.38:1 depth to width ratio. And that is not compliant with the ordinance. And we have some standards for approving a lot split, and the nonconformity that I just talked about is going to come into play there. So the first of those standards is if any parcel does not meet zoning ordinance requirements, the request shall be denied by the Planning Commission. So the proposed parcels don't meet that 4:1 depth to width ratio, and we'll talk about the implications of that once I get through the letter. Any partition or division shall be of such location, size, and character that in general it will be compatible with the existing development in the area in which it's situated. So we've noted that the 2 parcels will front on Belfast, as do neighboring parcels. And the parcel width would be similar to lots across the street. The deep lots on the north side of Belfast are considerably larger than any other lots in the Brookside Park subdivision. So making them smaller, or 2 smaller lots, actually brings them a little more in line with surrounding development. Then we've got 4 other standards. So conformity of the resultant parcels with the zoning ordinance standards, and the creation of parcels compatible with surrounding land. So the depth to width ratio, again, isn't met, but otherwise compatibility seems fine. Orientation of the yards of the proposed parcels in relationship to the yards of surrounding parcels in order to avoid incompatible relationships. Proposed lots would have the same front, side, and rear yard relationships as their neighbors. Impact of any existing floodplains, wetlands, topography, and other natural features and physical conditions on the resulting parcels so that such parcels are compatible with other surrounding lands in terms of buildable area. As we noted before, the site's bisected by a river. The portion of each site south of the river does appear able to accommodate development in accordance with district standards. So if you're considering just that area south of the river, they could meet the setbacks within that area and build something that fit the zoning. Relationship of the front, side, and rear yards to the yards and orientation of buildings on other existing and potential parcels. And the requested split does result in parcels that are generally consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. So now there are 2 other things I wanted to mention. One is that we're looking at a preliminary lot split. That's why you don't have a survey in front of you. For a final lot split, we would need a survey. But lot splits are allowed to proceed in 2 phases, and they're looking for preliminary right now. Now, per your ordinance, you don't have the ability to approve this lot split because it doesn't meet one of your ordinance standards. So what that means is that in order to effectuate this lot split, they would need a variance from that standard, which means that typically what we would do here is deny the lot split. They would go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and if they get their variance, they come back to you for their preliminary and final. Oftentimes, preliminary and final are done at the same time if they have the right information to get final lot split. Yeah, they're going to have to get a variance before you can approve anything.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Can we have the proponent come forward on behalf of this lot split? Introduce yourself and your address, please.
Hello, my name is Ryan Zabik. I'm the owner of the property at 29700 Belfast. As Joe mentioned, we are looking to split the lot right down the middle. It is, aside from the depth to width ratio, it is fairly similar to everything in the area. I actually did, upon seeing the issue with the ratio there, I did prepare a list of similar properties also zoned RA3 that exceed that 4-to-1 ratio. There's properties varying from just over 4-to-1 to, I think the most extreme I had on here was 7.2 and 7.4 on that 4-to-1. So there is precedence to support that. I don't know, would you like these?
Sure. A copy to our Secretary, Cheryl. Thank you very much.
And then, yeah, it's my wife and I are planning to retain ownership of both parcels, but we do have an intention of building on both. And yeah, we're kind of hoping that you guys will help us realize our dream.
Okay, good. Do you understand the kind of the process as Joe's laid it out for you and what the challenge is?
Yes, and before I went and spent the money on the formal survey and everything else, I wanted to make sure that this was feasible first, because we're not developers, we're just a couple of homeowners, so the money to do a survey is quite a lot to us.
Good, because we want to be as clear as possible so that the process is easy for you.
Yes, sir.
Does any of the commissioners have a question for Mr. Zabik or for Mr. Tangari? Barry?
The one question I have, you're showing other things where they don't meet the ratio, but do you know if they got variances?
I do not know. This is data that I was able to obtain through the GIS on the county's website. As to the specifics of that and what led to that, I do not know.
Well, the only comment I'd like to, I see what you're doing. I pretty much agree with what you're doing because you can't build on the last 2/3 of the property, but the problem that we have as a commission is we don't have the authority to grant it because it doesn't meet ordinance. That's why they have the variance process where you could actually ask for a variance to allow you to do the higher ratio, because, I mean, what you're doing is not incompatible with what's in the surrounding area. The lot splits would still make it compatible with the properties across the street, but we don't have the authority to go beyond ordinance, and that's what the Zoning Board of Appeals is for.
Okay.
And I'm sorry we had to put you through this, but we just can't do it.
As I said, I'm not a developer, so I start at square one and move from there.
But it'd make a difference if you were a developer. They'd have to go through the same process too.
They just know the ropes better is all.
Tom?
Yeah, just quickly through the chair, to get a chance to talk to Mr. Tangari today. Yeah, I agree with the end result. I think the commission needs to make a motion to deny the land division because it doesn't meet the depth to width ratio. We can then quibble on our end administratively and talk with the applicant about whether it's the zoning ordinance that causes that or the state law and our subdivision ordinance. Again, we never got a chance to chat today. So if you keep it general, we can decide where he goes from here, but I think from here he has to be denied.
Okay, very good, counsel. Thank you very much. Mr. Zavik, you got any other comments for the commission tonight?
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you and your wife for coming in, and thank you for submitting. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion?
Yes. Barry, do you have a motion for us?
Yes.
Okay.
I move the approval of preliminary lot split 2022. It's submitted by Ryan Zabik, sorry, be denied because it appears that the applicable provisions of the Chapter 34 zoning and/or Chapter 27 subdivision of land of the city code are not met, and the proposed lots,
Right there?
Yeah.
Would be good enough.
oh, I don't have to say it has to be,
Gonna keep it general.
We don't know if they're compatible or not until there's.
okay, I'll just,
Are not met, they don't meet the depth to width ratio, period.
Period.
Good enough.
okay, that's all I was gonna say.
Exactly.
All right, I'll leave it, leave it.
Okay.
I'll support.
Marissa got you before you, Johnson. Marissa, support. Barry's motion. Marissa, support. Joe, question.
Well, I'd like to go on the record
Please do.
as saying that I feel that the less development we have along the natural resource of the Rouge River, the better. I think that to compare a lot size of property that involves a wetland to the dimensions across the street that do not include a wetland is problematic. And I want that in the record.
Okay, so you're seeing a little bit of apples and oranges there.
I am seeing apples and oranges.
Okay, very good. Appreciate the comment. Any other comments from the commission? Okay, all in favor of the motion to deny because it lacks the ratio, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no, nay. Ayes have the denial. Your next step you'll get direction from the city attorney's office and staff in terms of the next step in the process. Thank you very much for coming in. Next item tonight is item B, amendment to PUD 5, 1993, and site plan 58 for 2022, location south side of 12 Mile between Drake and Investment Drive. The proposal, construction of 2 office buildings in an OS4 office research district. The action tonight of the Planning Commission is set for public hearing. Applicant is Robert Zantner, Yamasaki Inc., and the owners of Farmington Hills Corporate Investors LLC. Mr. Tangari?
Okay, thank you. Right, so this is part of PUD 5, 1993. So this is the last major piece of land in this planned unit development to be developed. And we have a couple of things going on here. We have a site plan, and then we also have an amendment to the agreement for PUD 5, 1993. And I'll get into the reasons that there's an amendment to the PUD in a few minutes. So what they're proposing is 2 large 4-story office buildings and a parking lot. Both buildings have a gross floor area of 150,000 square feet for a total of 300,000 square feet. Site's proposed to be accessed from a driveway off Investment Drive at the west end, and from the same access drive that serves JST at the east end. So a road connecting the two access roads isn't proposed. They're showing a private driveway ringing the site. I've summarized some of the issues that we saw with the site plan here at the beginning of the letter. So one is to label setback distances. It's pretty clear that the setbacks are compliant with our ordinance, but nevertheless, we like to have those labeled on the plan. It helps a lot, especially when they wind up getting building permits later on. The building exceeds the maximum height and number of floors, and that's not just in reference to the underlying OS4 district, that's also in reference to the planned unit development agreement, and I'll give you the details of that in a minute. Dumpster enclosure detail, screening hedge along 12 Mile, some adjustments to the lighting plan, and some tree replacement numbers need some adjustment. Those are comparatively minor issues. So we do have a site that's zoned OS4 with that PUD over it. We're looking at 18 acres of that planned unit development. It's not developed right now. Some of the trees have already been removed because a portion of the site is being used as a staging area for the construction of the JST office complex. Surrounding zoning is mostly OS4 with the PUD. Immediately to the west is that area we just looked at a couple of months ago, where they want to add some commercial uses to this planned unit development. And then across 12 Mile is the exception, where you have RA1, one family, and some single-family neighborhoods across 12 Mile there. So when we look at the height and the number of floors in the building, that's what's driving the PUD amendment. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to where I talk about the details of that, and then I'll go back to talking about the PUD amendment process. So the buildings exceed the height limits of both the underlying district and the PUD. And the PUD permits heights up to 55 feet in certain areas, but only where the grade is below 860 feet. And the proposed buildings are located on grades with an elevation over 860 feet, according to the preliminary grading plan, so the higher height limit afforded in certain areas of the planned unit development does not apply on this site. Permitting this height would require an amendment to the planned unit development agreement for that reason. Also, the original PUD reflected the 40-foot height limit that was then in place in the OS4 district. That's since been raised to 50 feet. The PUD has to be amended to permit the fourth story that's proposed on both of these buildings as well, because our ordinance in the OS4 district has a 3-story limit. So that would be another exception from the ordinance that they were asking for in order to build these buildings. So without amending the PUD agreement, those extra 5 feet of height and that extra story of height can't be approved.
So Joe, I got a question. So because the building's positioned where the topography is such that they don't meet the agreement, the PUD agreement,
Right.
so they exceed the height
Exactly.
by
Yep.
5 feet?
Exactly.
Okay. So have they looked at it, or has there been discussions, we'll probably find out later, in terms of moving the building to find a spot where they could accommodate the 5 feet?
I don't know that alternative locations for the building have been looked at. There's not really a spot on this particular lot where the grade goes below 860 feet for a large enough expanse of land to accommodate these buildings.
Okay, thank you.
So it would be tough. But when we look at the PUD agreement, so they're looking to amend the PUD to permit greater height in the area of the proposed building and an additional story. And per our ordinance, proposed amendments or changes to an approved PUD plan shall be submitted to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission shall determine whether the proposed modification is of such minor nature as to not violate the area and density requirements or to affect the overall character of the plan. And in that case, you can approve or deny the proposed amendment. However, if the Planning Commission determines the proposed amendment is material in nature, the amendment shall be reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council in accordance with the provisions and procedures of this section as they relate to final approval of the planned unit development. And if the PC makes a determination that this is a major amendment to the PUD, action on the site plan would be postponed until the amendment to the PUD is fully approved by council and the agreement's been updated accordingly. A public hearing would need to be set on the PUD agreement. Alternatively, when we looked at that other site, I believe there was some contingent approval made on that site plan that was contingent on the PUD agreement amendment being approved. But at any rate, final approval can't occur until the PUD agreement is amended. And with that, I think I'll leave the detailed, granular stuff about the minor site plan items alone for now, so that we can kind of focus on that conversation.
Okay.
But if anybody has any questions about that stuff, certainly I'm happy to
Thank
answer
you,
them.
Joe. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Tangari? Joe?
I believe you said that this amendment involves adding a fourth story?
That's correct. So our ordinance in the OS 4.
If you go from 3 stories to 4 stories, that to me is a 33% increase. Is there a decrease in the footprint?
Well, that would be a question for the applicant. You know, if they were not to get the 4th story, would they look at a different design that covered
Well,
more
you
of the
know,
lot with the
we're
building?
told this is an amendment, and it's an amendment to what? I don't know. So for me to know whether or not this is a significant change, I need to know that this is relative to what?
So it's an amendment to the PUD agreement,
But I don't have that
And-
PUD agreement,
and,
do I?
well, we could provide you with the text of the PUD agreement.
So I guess what we're trying to get at, so is the issue 3 to 4, or is the issue 5 feet?
It's both, because the underlying district is the OS4 district.
Okay.
The planned unit
And I suspect
development.
the agreement references that district.
Right, and the height limit in the OS4 district is 50 feet, 3 stories. So it allows 3 stories and it allows a height of 50 feet. In this case, they're looking to do 4 stories with a height of 55 feet. The PUD agreement is silent on the issue of the number of stories, so therefore the underlying zoning applies.
Okay, and I know Charmaine wants to say something. So what I'm thinking about now, what trumps that? So if the PUD talks about the height in that agreement, I guess I'll look to Tom at some point to talk about whether the zoning versus the agreement is something the Planning Commission should be looking at in terms of considering the significance of this difference. Charmaine?
You will notice, if you're familiar with the overall development for that there are other buildings already constructed with 4 stories.
Correct.
So at some point during the time frame between the original language for the OS4 district, it did not have that limitation on 3 stories. It had a maximum height.
Right.
And so that was met on the previous construction, but it changed in between since the language is the ordinance of OS4.
Yes, I seem to recall that. Thank you. Good point. Thank you, Charmaine. Joe?
So, you know, my point is directed at, the question before us, I believe, is this a significant change?
Right.
That is for the commission to determine.
And that's why I asked.
And through the chair, our advice to staff when they were preparing the report was, if you look at the definition of a major change, it includes, well, it talks about changes of a minor nature so as not to violate the area and density requirements of the ordinance. This does. So our position was, sort of on its face, it's a major amendment. And I know, you know, they were here a year or so ago with the other property, sort of just up the street a little bit. And in that case, they were looking to change the use. You found that to be a major amendment. You know, it's the commission's call, but it's really an ordinance violation, which It's kind of a major amendment. In our view, your call, but the language you're looking at is the bottom of page 2 for what constitutes a major amendment.
And we would definitely concur with that. We would definitely concur with,
Okay, so staff, legal counsel concur, that's their advice, and ultimately, it's the planning commission's determination, what we view as.
And just to finish up, the
Please.
last time they were here a year ago with the 2 retail buildings,
Right.
you did go ahead and process it as though they were, in compliance for the procedure, and then sent to council the final decision on the PUD, including whether or not to amend the PUD. And I think the idea there, correct me from a planning standpoint, is then council knows what you think about the whole plan.
Right.
At the time they decide whether they want to amend the written agreement. So, but again, your call.
Okay, very good, thanks, Tom. Good background, good legal advice. Any other comments from the commission? At this point, I'd like to have the proponent, applicant come forward and introduce themselves, where they're from, address. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening. Opening this up, we have a brief presentation. All right. Good evening. My name is John Ackerman with Atwell, 2 Town Square, Southfield, Michigan, 48076. With me this evening is Robert Zantner with Yamasaki Architects and Chris Kojan representing the developer on the site. We're here this evening just to request establishment of a public hearing at your next agenda meeting. I'm going to give you kind of a brief presentation. A lot of this will regurgitate stuff you've already heard, so I'll try to be brief. So on the screen is an overview of the entire Farmington Hills corporate campus. Everything in orange is constructed. The retail component that was briefly discussed is located right here. The JST corporate campus facility is under construction as we speak and is right here. Our proposed site is the remainder, as mentioned, about it's actually closer to a little in size overall, 18 as you can see here, and we are providing a cross connection between the 2 public access points. Now, one of the comments that came up was when we submitted, we actually sat down after we submitted, met with your staff, went over a couple of concerns and questions, and the primary conversation was that one of the requests was provision of a city connection point within a 60-foot public right-of-way connecting the 2 of them. We went back and forth. It's not a requirement of the PUD, and based on a lot of discussion that we had, it was, I think, amenable that we did our best to widen that. It's now 29 feet, it was 24, and that, additional concessions can be talked about later, but that's the plan that you have in front of you right now reflects that additional width of 29 feet. The goal of this whole project, or the goal of this plan, was to try and minimize our footprint. As you know, the site's wooded, and the intent was to do our best to try and minimize our footprint, to get in the square footage that we need, to get in the applicable parking that we need, to get in the cross-access, while trying to maintain as much of the trees surrounding the site as possible. So we could physically expand this parking grid even further, closer up to 12 Mile and on the backside, but the intent was to try and maximize tree preservation. So up until about here, you do have a strong existing natural vegetative screen that's not going away. We'll supplement it with additional landscaping. Same with on the east side of the site here, and then there's a few additional trees that were saved here adjacent to the wetland conservation easement. I'm going to let Robert Steven talk about the building.
Sure. Again, this is similar to some of the previous 4-story buildings that were done in the campus. It's within the 55-foot height from the physical first floor to the parapet of the building. And it's built in a similar manner as the Phase 5 buildings, which are right on the freeway. It'll be precast concrete or reflective glass, and they're designed to, in a manner to support single user or multi-tenant, depending on the ultimate leasing success for the project. So there are, actually, this building also fits within that setback zone from Middle 12 Mile, which is in the PUD. There's a distance from the center line of 12 Mile to the face of the buildings, that any building that was to be 55 feet in height had to be within that envelope. We comply with that. We comply with the 55 feet. It's the matter of just the physical grading of the land, the elevation of the land, and the ability to bring that first floor elevation down to 860. I think we're off by a little bit more than 3 feet in that regard. So that's the only thing that's putting us into non-compliance in this condition.
So, like I said, I tried to make it brief. Here to answer any questions that you all have. Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Good job. Questions from the commission for the applicant? Joe?
So I believe you heard, what I heard was that this change is going from 3 stories to 4 stories. How would you respond to that?
Well, the 4 stories allows us, as John mentioned, to
No,
compact.
I don't have a problem. It's just the question before us is sort of which path to take, okay?
Right.
And is it a significant change or is it not? And it seems to me that if it's an extra story, a 33% increase, then we'll probably call it more major and we'll go down one path as opposed to another, okay?
Okay?
So do you disagree with going from 3 stories to 4 stories? Do you think that that is a mischaracterization of what is happening here?
Well, from my perspective, of course.
And why?
No, I mean, I understand the PUD language, and I think we've complied with the original intent, which was to push those buildings furthest from the neighborhoods to the north towards the freeway. And we've actually, within a very narrow band of land that we're able to put these buildings, to be able to provide the utilization of the property, still preserve the green space at the perimeter, and be consistent with the other development in the park. And I think we've accomplished it, subject to some of the language, of course. But I think we've accomplished the spirit of that.
Any other questions? Barry?
Can you put up the slide of the rest of the project over there, please?
Campus, the whole campus.
The whole campus, yes. Of all the little orange buildings over there, they're not really little, how many of them are more than 3 stories?
This one here,
Okay.
both of these,
Right.
and wait, there's one more, right? This one?
No, that's it. That's it.
That's it. Okay, so
It's
the
the three in the
three
middle.
buildings here are 4 stories.
And the two
Should be
on,
noted that the 4-story building, this, you can see the setback and location of that building is consistent with what we're proposing.
and the ones, the 2 that are closest to the freeway, those are actually larger than the buildings you're proposing to build now, correct?
Yeah, those are 162,500 each building. We're at 150,000.
But my question is this, is what did you do when you got approval to build the other buildings? And at that time, there was only a 40-foot and 3 stories as opposed to a 50-foot and 3 stories. How did you get that approved by the planning commission?
Speak into the mic.
Again, the PUD allowed us within a certain zone on the property to build to a 55-foot elevation. We're within the 55-foot elevation for that 4-story building.
Well, the 2 red ones, the ones you want to build now, is that in the same, is that not within the zone?
It's also 55 feet, but the additional caveat is the 860 first floor elevation, which the
Oh, the
existing.
860, okay.
Yeah, that's what's the issue.
The site falls from 12 Mile down to the highway.
Okay. That's the difference between that site and the other sites, is the other sites were actually lower.
Correct. And again, the intent, we realize that we're further north in that building, but the intent is to preserve the native buffering along 12 Mile. The intent of the PUD was to screen this from the residential components on the other side of 12 Mile. So if we keep that large-scale naturalized buffering in place, it'll help obstruct these buildings. Where if we have to go lower, expand, then we're going to take all that out to expand the parking field to address, the square footage that we need.
Okay, so as I recall, to staff, the PUD did specify areas where 55 feet were allowed based on topography.
Exactly, yep.
It didn't address the issue of floors. It just said these areas are have a topo that we would be okay with 55 feet.
That's right, yep.
So my question is this, the 860, is that something found in nature, or is that 860 something that's engineered?
I think it's a combination of things. I don't recall if the language in the PUD refers to the natural grade or the established grade. We could look that up.
Yeah,
I've
I
got
guess
the
what I'm
language here.
hearing is that they're indicating perhaps they can meet the 860, but I assume there's some land balancing involved or whatever to accomplish that topo. And is that, and to Mr. Brickner's point, prior approvals, how was that accomplished? If they in fact,
Well, those places, that's naturally lower, that where the delta formation buildings, those ones that come together, like, that's naturally lower,
yeah,
quite a bit lower, actually. It would take a lot of mass grading to get down the 2 to 4 feet that they would need to get down on the current site to get below that 860. It would be a ton of earth moving.
so that's a good point to make. So in terms of trade-offs regarding this proposal, the planning commission has to consider in terms of moving that much earth, does it make sense? Press back, force back off a 12 mile, does it make sense to move that much earth to accomplish 860? Or will the 5 feet really make a difference?
No, because then once you move all that earth, it's inconsistent with the neighboring properties, and it'll be much lower than the neighbors, and it would look weird
Sure, yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
like having
versus the natural topography that it's following right now from 12 Mile to 696 or whatever.
Thank you,
right.
Kirsten.
You might flood out the office.
And of course, anything we develop cannot adversely affect its neighbor, so we know that, and that's a code requirement. So, okay. Gentlemen, any more comments?
I have one other thing I'd like
Yes,
to add,
Bob.
excuse me. Yeah. Also, if we're contemplating the 50-foot option under the underlighting ordinance, our floor-to-floor height would be diminished such that the building would be non-competitive in the marketplace. So we wouldn't consider that option.
Right, yeah, we assume that you're designing it so it will be competitive in the market
Right.
and that you need the additional height
We need the 55
to
feet
attract
minimum.
tenants.
Yep.
Right. Good point, thank you. Any more questions for proponents? Seeing none, Joe?
Sure. I just had two things that, based on some staff discussions that I wanted to just pose. We don't need answers to them tonight, but there's going to be a month between now and a hearing, so I just wanted to put these out there. One was, we have the commercial use that's approved next door. Is there any chance of getting a more direct pedestrian connection from these buildings to the commercial use? Because right now, there's a pedestrian connection up to the 12-mile sidewalk, but it's kind of like a long walk to the commercial use right next door. So is there a way to get a more direct pedestrian path over there? Was something we were talking about in the office here. And the other was, we're going to be opening the PUD for an amendment. Do they need as much parking as the ordinance requires? Because there's a lot of pavement there. So, and they are right at the requirement of the ordinance right now. But if they don't feel they need that, now would be the time to ask for a lower parking ratio.
It's a good question. Gentlemen, are you trying to make us happy, or is this something you need?
You know, that's really subject to the leasing and what type of tenant. We're trying to attract a large tenant. They've had interest from large tenants on this site. And the parking ratios differ based on the tenant. So we want to comply with the ordinance. If at all possible, we can land bank parking in the future when the leasing activity happens. I'm sure the developer would be willing to consider that. Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, we're not sure what the final use is going to be as far as the end user for the building. So we want to keep our options open right now, obviously to be competitive in the marketplace. So I'd say right now, obviously, we're not proceeding and building this on spec. We're waiting for a user, so I wouldn't want to limit those options right now.
The land banking option is an interesting one, though. Yeah.
Good. I guess I got a question for the attorney. So what are some of our options in terms of moving this thing forward and kind of getting feedback on the agreement and,
Well, I think, let's assume that the commission agrees that it's a major amendment, because we've got ordinance deviations. Those are usually in a written agreement. So if you consider it to be a major amendment, I think you have two options. You could sort of stop now, and they're both in Mr. Tangary's memo. You could stop now and send it to the city council and say, will you agree to this? And I think the issue with that is it's not attached necessarily to anything that has your thoughts on the project in general. Or you could set it for the public hearing, as the other option would be go through the process, knowing and letting them know when they get to council, they've got two jobs. One is convince them it's a good plan, and the other is convince them to amend the agreement. So if you set it for a hearing tonight, that's what would happen, similar to the last time where the use was changing. And I don't see any danger. I mean, it's possible council might say no, but the mere fact that you moved it forward doesn't mean that, the city is in a bad spot. Council still has whatever discretion it has.
so if we set a public hearing, we're setting a public hearing on what we've determined to be a major change. Are we also setting a public hearing on the site plan?
On the plan, yep, exactly. And the hearing's on the plan. So that's really what you're having the hearing on, the details of the plan and making your determination on that. And whether or not it's all going to be permitted just kind of sits over it. And both issues will go to council. But your next hearing and your next comments will mostly be on what do you think of the plan? Do you approve of the major amendment?
If I could really, I just would like to say one thing.
John, 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
Right. So secondarily, if we move ahead with the public hearing and the conversation around the parking, would we ask them to prepare like a second option around a land bank and maybe, based on what you think the needs are outside of the ordinance, how much parking you would need and then maybe need later, depending on your use?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
John.
Yeah, I just want to say speed to market is critical here. We did miss a month. We met with staff, revised the plans, resubmitted. We're trying to make this as, user-friendly for the city as well. So if we could, our request would be that if we could bring them both forward and the site plan would be approved condition upon having the PUD amendment approved by the council as well. That's what we would ask for.
Okay, John?
I'm fine with that.
I'm looking at your diagrams here. I don't see anything electric vehicle charging stations here. Are you planning on putting some on?
Absolutely. At the level of where we're at right now, it's not required. It's not a checklist item. We've had discussions with staff about it, and candidly, if you want this to be a marketable building, you absolutely need to have that
The
accommodated.
council will ask that question.
Yep. Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other comments, questions from the commission? So it's back to us in terms of the action item tonight is to set it for a public hearing. That's the request. Barry?
I move that the proposed amendment to PUD Plan 5, 1993, including site plan 858-4-2022 submitted by Robert, oh boy, Sazner? Beautiful. Close enough. Of Yamasaki Inc. dated May 18, 2022, be set for public hearing for the Planning Commission's next available regular meeting agenda.
Support.
Barry,
There's Barry made the motion, supported by John. Marissa has maybe some comments.
Add something to that.
I'd like to
stuff
just
there.
add to the motion, in that public hearing, we'd like to see a land bank option presented for the site plan for parking as well as indicated charging stations.
I will accept the amendment.
So will I.
Thank
I
you.
guess just
Yeah.
I don't know that that needs to be in the motion.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want them to be out of compliance if they decide they don't want it. I mean, they can submit whatever they want. I think they
Okay.
got the message.
We
It's
just,
on
we
the-
just want it in our.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, for
Doesn't need
emphasis
to be in the motion.
purposes, it'll be in the minutes, and we've
Okay.
discussed it. We've seen
So are you
that.
withdrawing your request?
I will withdraw my request. I do know it's, I think, something we know that council would want to see.
Then the motion will be as read.
Okay, motion by Barry to set it for public hearing, supported by John. I think that's where we're at for next meeting, when everybody's available. Joe?
So we're okay if the motion does not address the whether or not it's a major change question?
Correct. Yeah.
That's the purpose of the public hearing, right?
Yeah. So that'll be an
Thrash
issue
that
at
out.
the public hearing, and you'll make your final determination with that motion.
Everybody good? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. We'll see
Thank you
at a
very
public
much.
hearing. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Mr. Chair, if I could get Chris's last name.
Okay, Chris?
Sorry, it's Chris Kajoyan with the Kajoyan Companies out of Bloomfield Hills, Michigan.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Item C tonight is revised PUD Plan 2, 2021, and Site Plan 59-5-2022, location 27,400 12-mile road. Proposal, construction of a skilled nursing facility and condominium developed in an RA1B, one-family residential district. We're setting it, the action requested is setting it for a public hearing as well. Apellis Healthcare is the applicant. The owner is Evangelical Homes of Michigan. Evangelical Homes of Michigan. Joe.
Thank you. So those of you who were on the Planning Commission at the time, last year, will remember that at the time, they were just going for PUD and they didn't have site plan, a full site plan going concurrently. At this point, they're going for their final PUD determination, but they also have a full site plan, landscape plan, and tree removal that they're seeking approval for concurrent with their PUD final determination. So yes, we're at the corner of Inkster and 12 Mile. This is the old Sarah Fisher home. Zoned RA1B. It's a one-family residential, 26,000 square foot lots. Site's 31 and a half acres. There's the old Sarah Fisher home. It's a disused orphanage. It's been vacant for a very long time, consisting of 15 buildings. And Pebble Creek runs along the western edge of the property and then through the southern portion as well. We look at the adjacent properties. Within the city of Farmington Hills, it is mostly RA1B. We do have a little bit of RA1 to the south across 12 Mile, but that's a very similar district. It's all single-family homes. And then in Southfield, across the street, across Inkster, we have RT, which is attached single-family, and then we have OS, which is office service, and there's like an emergency veterinary clinic and a couple other things over there. And the site currently has 5 driveways to Inkster Road. So we're looking at a couple of things. It's final determination on the PUD is the first thing we're going to discuss. So at its meeting on January 21st, 2021, the Planning Commission granted preliminary PUD qualification to this site, citing the plan's compliance with all of the objectives under Section 322E, except for Objective 5, and that's discussed in some detail in the letter. The applicant sought a final determination that was granted by the Planning Commission on April 22nd, 2021. They subsequently appeared at City Council twice, on May 24th, 2021, and again on September 27th, 2021, where a motion of approval failed. And at its meeting on May 24th last year, council had provided the following concerns in its motion to postpone, which it felt were not sufficiently addressed on the plans reviewed in September. So one, the phrase that was used in the minutes was lack of imagination for the residential portion on the north end of the site and lack of amenities. They preferred owner-occupied dwellings over apartments with more amenities such as a pool or courtyard area with fire pits or other gathering areas. They noted that the density of the residential area was too high, and then there was too much parking area in the residential area, and they suggested exploring alternatives such as underground parking. So the applicants, after that motion failed in September, because council did not feel that the plans had changed sufficiently, the applicant has now returned with a revised plan and is seeking concurrent site plan and final PUD approval. So we have those 8 objectives that planned developments are supposed to meet. We're supposed to make findings that they meet them, and we made a finding that it met 7 of them when they got their initial preliminary qualification. And I'm just going to note which ones were cited by the Planning Commission at the time of granting preliminary qualification. So one was to permanently preserve open space or natural features. I won't read them all in full because we can get the gist of them. To permanently establish land use patterns which are compatible or which will protect existing or planned uses. To accept dedication or set aside open space areas in perpetuity. To provide alternative uses for parcels which can provide transition buffers to residential areas. To promote the goals and objectives of the master plan for land use. To foster the aesthetic appearance of the city through quality building design and site development, landscaping, preservation of unique and historic sites or structures, preservation of open space, and to bring about redevelopment of sites where an orderly change of use is determined to be desirable was the last one. So they resubmitted this portion of the PUD narrative. They have to meet one of those objectives in the opinion of the Planning Commission. And as noted above, the Planning Commission cited all of them except for 5 when they granted preliminary PUD qualification last year. So 4 of those objectives, 1, 2, 3, and 7, are addressed primarily via the preservation of trees along Inkster Road, large wooded areas on the western edge of the site, and the topography and other natural conditions of the Pebble Creek in the southern portion of the site. To further address item 2, they noted that the use provided for a transition from medical and office uses across Inkster to the single-family uses to the west. And to further address objective 7, they noted that the existing chapel will be preserved. On the plan last year, it was the administration building and the chapel. It's down to just the chapel now. That has been approved by the Historic District Commission. And they're going to, the materials that are proposed on the skilled nursing facility are intended to complement the materials on the chapel to which the skilled nursing facility will be attached. They similarly promise high-quality materials and design on the multifamily buildings. They make the case that objective number 4 is met by stepping down residential uses from attached units to detached ranches with walkouts as the site gets closer to the adjacent single-family neighborhood, as well as preserving some natural vegetation over there. And then regarding objective 6, the applicant asserts that goals of the 2009 master plan will be met by the plan, noting that the site will serve as a transitional property between more intensive uses east of Inkster and less intensive uses to the west, while preserving a historic building and improving access management, taking those 5 driveways down to 3 specifically. The goals of the master plan for special residential planning area number 3, which covers this site, are addressed later in my letter. And then finally, for objective 8, they talked about similar things to their case for objective 6. Both of these uses are not permitted in the underlying district, so the plan would require some variances in the district that do permit those uses. So the PUD is not sought solely to avoid a variance. It's looking for a mix of uses that would otherwise not be possible in this area. And a PUD is actually recommended for this site in the 2009 master plan. That's one of the special sites. There's about a dozen of them in the plan, and this is one of them. We find that the information submitted is sufficient to meet the requirements for final determination. And they have a land use plan that it refers to the two halves of the sites as Phase 1A and Phase 1B. The skilled nursing facility is Phase 1A, and the mixed residential is Phase 1B. They're both about 14 acres. And then there's 6.2 acres of natural preservation in the Phase 1 area. They also have this one area, it's about an acre, that's potentially to be split and sold for single-family development. I think that the applicant has to explain the thinking behind that, because that's just sort of an outlier in the plan. They are proposing that about 19.6% of the site be assigned to open space uses and preservation of existing landscape. I noted the historic designation before. The Historic District Commission has a couple of contingencies that they placed on their notice to proceed. They want materials from demolished buildings to be stockpiled for future reuse. They don't want the proponent proceeding with any demolition until other associated approvals are received. So they have to get through the end of the approval process for demolition to occur. And then any building approved for demolition but left standing would remain subject to Historic District Commission review. And then finally, we've got the master plan, which designates the site single-family residential. Residential density map identifies the parcel as low density. That's consistent with the current zoning. The master plan identifies this parcel as a special residential planning area number 3, and it sets a set of goals and policies for the parcel. And now I will go through all these at the public hearing. I don't think I'll read through them all tonight, but if there's any that we specifically want to discuss, please bring it up to me.
Public hearing will be fine.
Yeah. And likewise, for the detailed review of the site plan, I think I'm going to leave that until next month. I'll call attention to just a couple of bolded items just so that we're aware that they need to be discussed. So one thing I'll note is that previous versions of this plan exceeded the density that was permitted in any of our RC districts. This version of the plan actually comfortably fits within any of our RC districts. So the density that they're proposing now is actually less than the maximum that would be permitted in the RC1 district. So they've made a significant change in the amount of housing that they're planning to put on the site. They are seeking some height from the front setback from Inkster, or some relief from the front setback from Inkster Road. They have 33.5 feet where the ordinance requires 50. And then, of course, they're seeking relief from our ordinance for the uses that they're proposing, which would not otherwise be permitted here. I'll stay away from the informational issues. One thing that I'll note, because it's something that the applicant might want to think about between now and then, is that they're providing vastly more parking than is required for a skilled nursing facility. And when we see a lot of excess parking over a requirement, we always ask why. So I would like the applicant to know that they should be prepared to address that. Another thing is that we have these detached units, these ranch units, and there's a walkway network through the multifamily part of it, and it extends over around the skilled nursing facility, but the walkways are not present in the single-family detached portion of the site. And it seems as though that walkway network, it would make sense to extend it through to all units that are in the development. So that's another thing that we wanted to bring up. And I know engineering has some concerns with the way some of the interior circulation network is laid out and some of the widths and things. And so there will probably be some discussions in between now and next month about those issues as well. But those are the issues I wanted to call some attention to tonight. And if you want to talk about anything else, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gary. Questions for Joe? Joe?
So I believe you started by saying that approximately a year ago, we reviewed a plan, sent it to the city council. City council found it unimaginative.
That was the word that was recorded in the minutes, yes.
And it seems as though city council may have said some things to us, some feedback. But that was a year ago, that old plan. Nearly half of us weren't even on the planning commission a year ago to know what that old plan looked like. So given all that, we're only here to vote on whether or not to set it for public hearing. If we set it for public hearing, I would like to have a copy of what was sent before, so that you say there are significant changes, but I would like to see what those changes are, and especially for the new planning commissioners, I think they should have that opportunity. All right?
Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Everybody okay with that? Okay.
Yep.
Please.
Yeah, I would like to see.
Barry?
No, it's not before us.
It's, I guess, background material?
I remember it was a bunch of multi-story apartment buildings. There were no single condo type.
Yeah.
Just a map just like the one you're showing right now.
Yeah, there was one sheet that was a decent summary sheet that we could dig out of the
This is
archive.
just as background. That's not subject to the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from commission? Proponent?
Well, tonight, it's probably not necessary.
Yeah, not necessarily tonight.
Thank you.
If you want to come up and
Appreciate
speak,
that.
we'd appreciate comments up at the podium. Please introduce yourselves and address, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm Raj Patel with Optalis Healthcare. I've been in front of the Planning Commission now a couple times, and just with the same excitement, I'm back here with a, let's say, a much improved revised plan with multi-dimensional input from our neighbors to the property that we want to develop, from the Historic District Commission, from City Council. And I think with everybody's input, we were fortunate to be able to get to a plan that I think we felt, enough energy to come back and start all over. Because this has been a year and a half or two of sort of working on this, and we feel like this plan is going to make sense for the community, make sense for us as a developer and operator of skilled nursing facilities. And I have our co-developer partner here, or I should just say co-developer, Robertson Brothers, Tim Lochran, is going to talk about the north side of the property. So when we first came in front of the Planning Commission a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, we did not really have a partner developer. The site's too big for my use. We own and operate 14 facilities around Southeast Michigan. We're very familiar with what the needs of the community are, and this site was attractive for us. That's why we're at it for 2 years, and unless you say no, we're not going to give up. But it's a challenging site. It's a very challenging site. I don't need to tell you this, but I'll tell you it anyway. It's from grade to the issues with the historic district and the contamination on the site to just, the wetlands and the part of it we can develop. It's pretty tight to begin with. And we've been, I think, have been as transparent with, especially the Historic District Committee, which I have to commend, was accommodating to begin with, and then they came back and gave some more to help us get the density down. You heard it was lack of imagination was what we got back from City Council as our first set of comments, which is to the plan where we showed apartment complexes on the north side. And I mean, they were just sketched out apartment complexes. So, I mean, I don't know how imaginative we could have gotten with it, but long story short, the city council was interested in less density and not for lease type of product. They wanted owners coming in there and so forth. The neighbors didn't want townhomes. We'd initially shown a plan since the apartments, which started at 144 units, to then put townhomes on the entire site for the residential side, because that would have been an economically better situation for all of us, for us, the developers. But the density was too much, and the neighbors to, I guess, our west didn't want that transition from those higher-end single-family homes. So this is all a product of everybody's giving and sacrificing and coming to a compromise. And in this case, typically when you have that, everybody goes home unhappy, but in this case, I think we're very happy, so we hope you're gonna be happy. So what we've done here is we've dropped the density down from the presented last plan of all 3 or 4 items that the city council had put forth, and which included a whole bunch of public comments that essentially were coming back from the city council, which is lower density, higher end properties next as we transition in. So we went from 156 units to 94 now on the residential side. We really didn't get much either pushback or objections to the nursing home side of the development anyway. There's really no adjacent neighbor really either way. And so there wasn't too much pushback on the design or any of the other features of the skilled facility. So we've achieved a 40% reduction in density. We've achieved the type of product with a tried and, reputed residential developer. Our reputation speaks for itself. I think we can do a tremendous project here. And thanks to the cooperation from the Historic District Committee and City Council, and hopefully the city at large, including the incentives that we're seeking and so forth to get this project to come to fruition, we look forward to being great corporate citizens in this fantastic city. We have a short presentation, and we'll make it as short as you want, and then both available here for questions.
Thank you.
Sure, it's good. I'll let you borrow your own.
Want you to lose it. Perfect.
In your name again and address.
Yes, I'm Tim Walkren, Robertson Brothers Home, 6905 Telegraph Road.
Thank you.
Let me put this on. Can't find it on here. That'll be fine. So again, nice to meet you. This is a little out of sequence for us. We are typically meeting with you first, but we got involved kind of after the process, which was a little strange for us. So this is the first time Robertson's actually been in front of you. Most of what we had reviewed here at the city was with the city council, so we got a lot of feedback there. Neighbors were involved, historic district, obviously, but of course, haven't had any input from you on our residential section. As a fellow planning commissioner myself, I'd much rather go to you first. You're the most important commission or the most important board here, so don't tell the city council that, but maybe I'm biased.
That's what we think.
So I'm going to go through a quick presentation. It's very Robertson-centric, just because I think that's more important here. Just kidding, Raj.
Sure. Whatever you said.
So the project summary. So this is for the entire site. It's about 30 acres, 28 net. It is our A1B, as you know. We're proposing a PUD. Number of skilled nursing beds is 100. I know that's come down since when you first saw the project. Number of homes proposed certainly has come down, and you've heard that from Raj. We're at 94. And what's really interesting about this is there are 3 really distinct plan types, which we think is very important here. When we first proposed on the site, we proposed all townhomes, single car and 2-car townhomes, which we feel would serve a missing middle need, which is not served in Farmington Hills. We got the feedback loud and clear that that's not necessarily what Farmington Hills wants. They wanted to see more of what we're building in some other communities with a detached ranch, especially adjacent to the adjacent neighborhood. So we did revise the plan. We just really can't make it efficient with all ranches on the site. Backing up to Inkster didn't work for us. We were very clear from the start about that. But we think this mix, having a mix of uses, which we've done in other communities, a village, if you will, really kind of works well. So it's 3 distinct for sale offerings. Again, they're all for sale, so none of this is rental, which was what the first time you saw was. 30 single story, these are all ranches, or story and a half, which is basically the same plan with bedrooms upstairs. All first floor masters. That is everything on the west side. And then there's 29, what we call our kind of mid-level 2-car townhomes, two bedroom or 2-bedroom with a den. That's our MR plan. And then 35 1-car, 1,200 square foot townhomes. Again, everything is for sale. Building height, it's mentioned in the staff report. Skilled nursing is under 30 feet, 2 stories. Our detached condos are 1 and 1.5 story, 18 to 21 21 feet. And then the attached single families, that would request a waiver on that, just under 35 to the midpoint. So I'll go quickly on this. Again, we think that's very high quality. We are providing the owner-occupied empty nester ranches, which I really think is, this will be a home run here. We've heard it many, many times. We're building in other communities. It's really interesting, about a quarter of the residents in the particular city buy these. 50% come from surrounding neighborhoods, because there's just, most of the communities don't have this, so I think you're gonna bring people in. And then about 25% come from out of state, which is interesting. But this product itself draws in, it draws people to move from the colonial homes, open those up to families that are looking to be in the school district, which is a great school district. So we think that that's just another component of the product. And again, the missing middle homes, you know, we're proposing this because it's just unaffordable. It's very, very difficult to get into a new home these days. To buy a single-family home with a lot, traditional lot, I mean, we can't build them for less than $400,000. Frankly, it's hard to get them under $500,000. This product that we're showing you is for really, I think, the meat of the market. And since we've proposed this, the market's just, you know, costs have just gotten worse. So we think this is a very important component to remain in the plan. Walkable community, a lot of internal amenities which we can go into. We are reusing historic materials and signage that came about from the historic district that we had that discussion with. There is an appropriate transition to the neighbors to the west. It's really a buffer. That's a really good use of this product, which you'll see on the site plan in our mind. And then just shameless self-promotion. We've been around a long time. You know, we build a lot of both of these types of products around. We're a top 5 home builder. You know, we have a 95% willingness to refer, and we're very proud of that. I think that says a lot about who's building in your community, and it's important to you that you have a developer that, you know, does what they say. So this is just overall, you're all familiar with the site, how it lays out. You have the neighborhood to the west, obviously, a higher density to the east, and a lot of commercial, office, retail abound. You know the site. So this is a combined site plan. You had seen this previously. I know it's not, well, it's not easy to read because it's not colored up. I apologize for that. But, you know, this really shows how it connects. You know, we look at this as, if we had our druthers, we'd probably have the detached ranch units, which are on the bottom, which is the west. We'd have that as a private enclave with a private entrance off of Cheswick. You know, that's probably not something that you'd want to see. So we're combining it with the townhome development. But we do see this as separate from Raj's development. So we have some gates and that sort of thing. Emergency vehicle access, yes, you want to ask a question?
Go ahead, Joe.
The question that was posed earlier, while you've got that up, was, why do you feel you need as much parking at the facility as you're seeking?
That's a good answer for me. Okay, so this is a 100 patient capacity facility, mostly private rooms. Are within the broad definition of skilled nursing facilities, you have different patient types. This is going to be a state-of-the-art, higher-end facility for a concentration on rehabilitation. So strokes, orthopedic cases, and so forth. Short-term stays, a lot of visitation, higher ratio of staff, given the types of patients we take care of. So 3 to 4 staff, direct care is what we practice every day. This is the type of patient we take care of. In terms of, I'm sorry, the other way around. 3 to 1 resident to staff ratio, okay? So about 30 to 35 direct care. Then we have obviously, this is an inpatient facility.
Are
so
they all there at the same time, or is that over the 24-hour period? Your ratio?
shifts. They need the same ratio all the time.
So that ratio is maintained?
Yeah, they just change shifts and then the next batch comes around. Now, night shift might go down a little bit, but we have to plan for the max, the highest peak shift, which is a day shift. And we have kitchen staff, janitorial, housekeeping, all the support services, visiting professionals, physicians, physical therapists, respiratory therapists, and then visitation. So we have 2 parking lots. We have the guest visitors all on the, I guess, the south side in this schematic, and then the north side abutting the townhomes is the staff entrance, which comes to the back. So we practice, we run these buildings every day, and we've got facilities that are about this size with close to 100 spots, and it gets tight in certain times. Then there's events and all kinds of things going on where we could spill over, and then there's really no other place to park. So we really feel that this is the amount of parking we need. And we have the room for it, so.
I was going to say, maybe you could cut the workers a deal if they live next door and they could just walk to work.
Yeah, it's a good idea, or they could just rent their garages and park. Oh, it's a great idea, it might happen.
Sell them a unit.
Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
You know, the concern is that part of this is wetland and preservation and all that. And it was just odd, I thought, that you were seeking so much parking. But I put a lot of faith, not in our regulations, but in our developers to know just how much parking you need.
Well,
You've
and
thought
I'll
about
just
it?
say, we don't want any more parking than we need to because we have to build it.
Costs
and
money,
maintain
yeah.
it and light it up and do all the things that we have to do to it. But it's very inconvenient when people want to visit and they can't get a place and it's just, they have to circle the block and all that, so.
I visit
This is the
people
need
in
of
the
the day.
nursing home, and believe me, I never have a problem finding parking.
So that unfortunately does happen in the long-term type of care settings
Yes.
where you park grandma and then nobody ever shows up, and that's unfortunately the other kind.
Yes.
These are the residents that still have a big inheritance to give away and all. There's a lot of visitation here.
So your residents are typically only going to be there, it sounds like a month or two with the rehab, typically.
Not even a month, it's a 15 to 18-day length
Yeah,
of
yeah.
stay.
So
these
they
are
get lots of
folks
visitors.
just out of a hospital, the family's all still,
No,
they
that's
haven't given up on them, they're
Fine
there.
answer. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I do have a question in reference as far as the homes.
Yes.
And the condos. First of all, I've not even seen this type of combination of a skilled home along with condos and single or detached condos. So I'm just kind of curious as to how did that come about with the two of you, with a nursing home, and then you have individual homes, condos. So I'm just curious, how did that combination, how did that?
Sure, okay. Well, I mean, they build houses everywhere. Nursing homes typically have traditionally been in residential areas. That's the idea of a nursing home. Rehabilitation center is people go to hospitals that are built closer to freeways and so forth, but when they need their rehab stay, they want to come closer back to home and neighborhoods where they can get visitation and so forth. So traditionally, nursing homes have always been scattered around and pretty proximate to residential areas. This site, when we selected the site for many geographic and demographic reasons and so forth, it just was too big of a site for us. That's what it was. So we carved out our side. It's not like the nursing home smack in the middle and the homes are all around us. We pushed down to the side. We're gonna have barriers and it's gonna feel like two different, the idea is the nursing home folks and their visitation stays there, and we really aren't interested in having a lot of the residential side coming over to this. It's a healthcare facility. People that have business there should come, and people that don't have business there ought not be loitering around.
So is the parking lot going to be a combination for the residents and the condos?
No,
visitors?
we'll have sufficient parking on the residential portion. Each unit would have at least 1 or 2 cars in the garage themselves. And then they would have a driveway with either a 1 or 2 car as well. So we feel we have enough parking. We even have areas for guest parking. So we had talked about having a shared parking arrangement. I don't think it's necessary. It's not something that we've continued that dialogue.
And then my last question, you mentioned internal amenities.
Yep.
Where would that be?
I've got a couple other slides that will get to that.
Okay.
But yeah, some of the things we're adding in, some of the historical, signage and art and that sort of thing. Still kind of fleshing through that as we go through.
So there'll be a separate building for your internal?
As far as amenities?
Yes.
No, the amenities, I'm only talking about outdoor amenities. We wouldn't have any type of building for an amenity.
Okay.
The only exception, there would be a building that would be connected to Raj's building, which would be the historical, and I've got a slide of that, rehabbing the historical chapel, which would be a component of that, and that's kind of in the middle of the project.
Okay, thank you very much. Wait a minute. Thank you for all good questions. Thank you. I think I've got a commissioner who'd like to make a motion, and we're going to have a public hearing, and I think we all have a sense of what the project is proposing. We thank you, and we also realize it's an extensive process, given the review Joe gave and the different commissions and the council and the background and things like that. So you certainly have your challenges ahead of you, but we certainly appreciate the effort and the information tonight. So do I have a motion?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. I commend your efforts. I move that revised PUD Plan 2 2021, included in Site Plan 59-4-2022, submitted by Optilis Healthcare, dated May 18th, 2022, be set for public hearing for the Planning Commission's next available regular meeting agenda.
Support. Okay. Marissa's motion, John supported. Any questions on the motion? Good. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. You got your
Thank
public
you.
hearing. Thanks for coming in, gentlemen.
Forward to my second.
Press on. We have one more item, so we're ready to keep going. Good? Okay. Next item is revised PUD Plan 3 of 2021, location 680 Northwestern Highway. Proposal, construction of a multifamily apartment building in a B2 community business and B3 general business district. We're setting it for public hearing. Applicant is Robert Asmar. Northwestern Highway Holding Company LLC is the owner and applicant. Mr. Tangari?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yes, this is one we've seen a couple times already. Of course, some of you weren't on the Planning Commission the first couple times we saw it, so it'll be new to some of the planning commissioners. What you have here is there's actually a planned unit development to the north with senior living and some climate-controlled self-storage. And then this is a site that plans to share the access that's already used by the climate-controlled self-storage facility to the northwest. It's zone B2, B3, about almost 6 acres. It's mostly vacant right now. As you're aware, there is a concrete batch plant on the site right now. Adjacent properties, there's that senior housing to the north, commercial around most of the rest of it, but there is a multifamily development to the east along most of that eastern property line there. So at its meeting on February 18th, 2021, the Planning Commission granted preliminary PUD qualification approval to the site, citing the plan's compliance with Objective 8 of Section 322.E. And that objective is, it was the only one we cited, so I'll just read it now. To bring about redevelopment of sites where an orderly change of use is determined to be desirable. At the time, planning commissioners generally didn't take issue with the proposed use, but several did express reservations about the scale, particularly the density and the height of the proposal. The PUD was also reviewed by the Planning Commission at its meeting on August 19th, 2021. One recommendation was postponed to provide an opportunity for the applicant to amend the plan in response to discussion at that meeting. The motion to postpone included some advice, non-binding advice, but advice to the applicant to reduce height and overall density and increase the east side setback. The applicant seeking final PUD qualification, but is not seeking site plan approval concurrent with this final qualification. Preliminary approval is, of course, not a guarantee of final approval. The applicant hasn't submitted an updated narrative, so the following discussion in the letter is in response to the previously submitted narrative. They cited more of the criteria or objectives for a planned unit development than the Planning Commission granted when it gave preliminary qualification. They called attention to 1, 2, 7, or 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And the Planning Commission agreed to grant them because it met 8. I'll try not to get into too much detail here because I know we're just setting a public hearing. One of the other standards that we look at is the PUD shall not be allowed solely as a means of increasing density or as a substitute for a variance request. And an increase in density is definitely sought by the applicant, but the proposed use isn't permitted in the underlying districts. So that does appear the request is not made solely to avoid a variance, but there are some deviations from ordinance standards that would definitely be requested to facilitate the conceptual plan. We find that they've submitted what they need to submit for final determination. The one thing that's not there is a use plan or a land use plan, which shows what areas of the site are for which use. But we know that they're only proposing one use, so the land use plan is, it's just, there's one use on the site and it's the whole site. So we don't really need that particular item. Just sticking to some of the higher level things here. When we look at density, they got 253 units they're proposing. The number of each type is 131 bedroom units, 119 two-bedroom units, and 4 three-bedroom units, and I've given the room counts for those per our ordinance in parentheses there. So that's a total of 633 rooms, and we measure density based on the room count. The last couple versions of the plan had 514 and 505 rooms respectively, so the number of rooms has increased. And that's based on the number of one-bedroom and two-bedroom units both increasing since last time. A number of three-bedroom units came down a little bit. So when we look at how many rooms this amount of land could support in each of our RC multifamily districts, we find the number is 126, 127, and 230 based on the RC1, RC2, and RC3 districts respectively. So the proposed density of 633 rooms is about 2.75 times that of the densest multifamily district in the city. And density has increased from earlier iterations of the conceptual plan. When we look at the master plan, the portion of the site that's zoned B2 is called out as multiple family on the future land use map, and the portion of the site zone B3 is called out as non-center type business. B3 portion of the property is consistent with this designation. The B2 portion, of course, is not. Property is not addressed on the residential density map. It's adjacent to a multifamily complex that's high-density residential on the multifamily, on the residential density map, and that designation covers all 3 of our RC districts on the future land use map. And then just to focus in on what they're requesting relief from, they've got 4 standards that they'd be looking for other than the use itself. So height, their proposed maximum height is 69 9 feet, or 50 feet is permitted in the underlying district, so that would be a deviation of 19 feet. East side setback to residential, they're proposing 54.47 feet. The underlying district requires 75 feet. That's a deviation of 20.53 feet. For density, we don't have a base district for density standards that they've identified, but we've kind of defaulted to the RC3 because they're over any of them. So 633 rooms are proposed. Maximum number of rooms permitted in RC3 would be 230, so that's a deviation of 403 rooms. And then the parking requirement for this number of units with this room count would be 508. They're proposing 414 spaces. That's a deviation of 94 spaces. I will note that more than half the spaces they're proposing are actually in the building on the ground floor. If there's anything else in here that anybody would like to talk about, definitely feel free to bring it up. We have a couple notes about bicycles and EVs in there, but we're not at the site plan phase, so those are things we can talk about at the public hearing.
Thank you, Joe. Commission, any questions for Joe? Good, okay. We'll turn it over to the proponent. Want to come forward and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your project, bring us up to speed.
Good evening.
Evening.
So we have been in front of you before, and density was an issue.
Name and address.
Oh, Keith Phillips, 9049 Riverside Drive, Brighton, Michigan.
Thank you, sir.
Density was an issue, still is an issue. I do want to make one correction. The height of the building is actually 59 feet. We adjusted the building down and never adjusted the height of the roof, so I apologize for that on our end. So the height's actually 10 foot lower than what it shows, what was just discussed. I'd like to say, part of me would like to say that the same for the density, but part of me wants to say, no, that's not the case, because when we looked at this project, we looked at the competitors in the surrounding area. We looked at what was workable for my client and as well for the community at large. One of the things we noticed was the Emerson, which was just approved, I think, by this board and then ultimately the city council. So we kind of took that as a basis to do some comparative numbers off of. And when we dug into it, we found that they were roughly 113 rooms per acre, and we were at 114 rooms per acre. We looked at the density, or the units per acre. They were at 43.66 units per acre. We're at 45 units per acre. Parking spaces, we looked at the number provided for that development, and that sat at 1.69. We're at 1.64. So we took that as a basis because that's our competitor, and we tried to build off of that composite in what we ended up doing, and that is why ultimately we reduced the project from 5 stories to 4 stories, brought the height down 10 feet, but at the same time we did increase the density because of the conditions that are in today's world. Costs have gone up exponentially in the building industry. We are looking at economy and scale. There is some of that at the same time, but we are cognizant that we're trying to give comparative to what our competition's giving. And I can walk us through the project really quick. I think it's on here. Is it on here?
It's on our computer.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what you want to see. If you let me know, maybe we have it.
I think we had a couple images I could bring up.
Yeah, summary
Yeah, so
presentation would be good.
this, we show the first floor here, and we've enclosed most of the parking underneath the building, and we've kept that consistent with what we did before. The difference now is we've located that as a subterranean structure to mitigate that height. Now, one of the things we have talked about, and we can get to a comparative, I think, in fact, the Emerson was at 52 feet height. They have a flat roof. We have a hipped roof. We could get to 52 feet. It would have a very different look. It would be more commercial, be a little bit more blunt, but we're not against that. In fact, I'm more of a contemporary designer anyways, so this is a little further from my scope. That is one thing that we could do. We're really happy, though, with the direction of the project, and we like the fact that it does incorporate quite a bit of green space. And we try to provide that for everybody involved. We've created some interior gallery spaces, amenities galore in the building. So we're trying to provide a top-level service to the community. If you want to go to the next, oh, actually, here you can begin to see when we brought down the building, it did begin to become a little bit more in tune with that project to the northeast, which was the concern before for the two-story residential over there. Again, those interior courtyards, those are the layouts of the rooms. We tried to emphasize it more on a communal type of living with the focus on the pool areas and those common areas. Next page would be fine. You can go to the next one. I think we got a section going at the end, and if we want to get to that.
We didn't include every.
Oh, okay,
story from the
okay.
use.
So anyway, so what we had done, and I think I tried to explain it, was we dropped the building down to help. Anybody else have any comments over here? Anybody want to add anything? I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you.
On it? You're very welcome. Good?
Yeah, no.
John?
Have you received the letter from the fire marshal dated June 6th? who said
You know what? I just
Unable
had a
to
chance to look at it,
approve?
but I think Jim can answer.
Yes, good evening. Jim Butler with PEA Group. Yes, we have received that letter.
Can you meet those standards he's requesting?
Yeah, I have not had the opportunity to talk to Jason about it. He talks of dead-end drives and secondary. We have 2 points of access around the building. So I need to talk to him about that. He had a concern about a dead-end length of 100 feet, and we don't exceed that. But we can certainly meet with him and,
Where your driveway comes in there off Northwestern?
Yes.
Is that a curb in there, or is that actually connected?
that whole thing is connected.
Okay.
So we have, if you come in, you could make a right-hand turn, go all the way around the building, go to the north, and come back out.
The color change on the drawing is
The existing road.
existing to the.
There's an existing road there.
Okay.
So maybe he's not seeing that, so I will talk with him about that.
Okay, as long as you can get it past him.
Are the renderings here reflective of the planned exterior facade and materials?
They are reflective of it at this point, yeah. I think that was where we were headed towards. More of a residential feel, a little bit. We did talk about maybe pushing it more a little progressive, but I think at this point, you know, we're pretty happy.
Okay.
I know the client is.
Any other questions? Proponent? Do I have a motion? Mr. Brickner?
I move that the proposed revised PUD Plan 3 2021 submitted by Northwest NWH Holdings LLC dated May 18th, 2022 be set for public hearing for the Planning Commission's next available regular meeting agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Kanji, second? Thank you. Okay, have a motion to set for public hearing, and we have a second. Any comments on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
One nay.
I'm a nay,
Motion.
I'm a nay as well.
2 nays. Motion carries. Set for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in tonight. Have a good evening. Okay. Thank you.
Supported, who supported that?
Mr. Trafelette.
No, I didn't.
I meant who supported the motion?
Yes.
Let's go with the 2 nays. Marissa and Mr. Trafelette were the nays.
No, who actually?
Grant.
Mr. Brickner made the motion.
And then Tom.
Kanji supported the motion.
Thank you, that's what I needed.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Good question. Maybe ask them.
And so we've got comments. I'm going to have a comment on that motion later on under commissioner comments. At this point, I think we have minutes to approve. We got the April 21st and the May 19th minutes up for approval. And we had an opportunity to review them, and do they look okay? If they're okay, would somebody make a motion? Mr. Brecker.
Yes, actually, 2 April 21st and 1 May.
19.
Okay.
I move to approve the minutes from April 21st at 2022 at 6:30, April 21st, 2022 at 7:30, and May the 19th at 6 o'clock.
You have a second? Support. Thank you, John. All in favor of approving the 3 sets of minutes, 2 on April 21st and 1 on May 19th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Okay, public comment. We do have a couple individuals who were before us, the first item tonight. I hope you enjoyed the meeting. Thank you. Do you have any public comments for us? Okay, thanks for coming
Can I ask
tonight.
him a question?
John has a question for you.
I have a question for you. Have you, I mean, how much was your water table? How high is your water table in there? Have you checked it?
So off the top of my head, I believe that at the river, it's 840 feet, and there's a 14-foot rise up to the pool area.
Okay.
So it goes from the relatively 100-year floodplain to 500.
Okay. You don't, do you live in the neighborhood?
Not currently, we sold our home recently in our state.
Okay. I'm just curious if you've seen it, if it has
Yeah,
it flooded.
I think they want you on the mic, sir.
We wanted it on mic. So, Cheryl, reflect that Ryan spoke, inquiry from John for the record about water table, just for the record. We
It'll
didn't get it
just be
on.
a general comment
General
about the
comment.
water table.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think we're good. We're on YouTube or something, so they like to pick up the conversations, which makes sense. Thank you very much. We are curious up here, so we'd like to know what's going on. Thank you. So that concludes public comments. Commissioner comments. Joe?
It's too cold in here.
Freezing.
Walk outside.
Nice.
Okay.
I hear it's hot out there.
It is really cold over here.
A little chilly. It is a little chilly. Right. Okay, Danielle?
No, nothing tonight.
No, say it's too cold.
Okay, so noted. Thank you. I hope it's feeling good about being on the planning commission, and this is your second meeting or second regular meeting?
Yes, my first regular meeting, second meeting.
Okay. It gets easier as we go along.
Oh, it was pretty easy.
Good.
I know when to be quiet,
Tell me
but
it
I
doesn't
don't
feel
know
easy.
what's going on.
If you do, if you want to ask what's going on, raise your hand. I will recognize you, and that's the time to just kind of let it out. Okay? Thank you,
Absolutely.
Danielle.
Thank you.
Great having you. John?
No.
Okay.
Good.
Marissa?
I'm good. Good.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. It is chilly. Chilly. Thank you. Very.
I'm wearing a suit, it's fine.
Okay.
I want to welcome all the first timers to this side of the planning commission. I know that my first planning commission meeting was in 1995. And I will tell you this, so when you're on the planning commission, you will learn a lot about zoning and planning and finding out what the community wants and trying to express what the community wants through this. But the only thing, you've heard a little bit about it today, that even though there were some things we would have liked to pass, we just don't have the authority to do so, and that's what the zoning board of appeals is about. But it's a great learning experience, and and we thank you all for contributing to the community by being on this commission, because that's an important part of being here is representing the community. And again, welcome, and we're gonna go outside, and all you guys are freezing now, but when I go outside, I'm gonna be sweating.
Okay, I have a comment. I echo, Barry, your comments, and, you know, it's over time, it'll make a lot of sense to you what we're doing up here and whatever, and we're excited about you guys as well being on the board. My only comment has to do with the issue of denying, and of course, people can vote how they want to vote, is the opportunity to have a public hearing, to at least have a public hearing and some due process in the processing of applications. So I've always kind of philosophically, and this is just my, whether you're for a project or against the project, I think everybody's due process in terms, and of course, this is, Tom may want to weigh in or may not want to weigh in, and I'm not trying to influence anybody, it's my opinion that people are at least entitled to a public hearing.
I mean, I think it's more than an opinion or philosophy. They're entitled to a public hearing, even if you all intend to vote no on it. Your job is to hold the public hearing, make the recommendation to council, and then they make the ultimate decision. So unless somebody has not submitted all the material that they're required to submit, and you have the ability to say, well, you're postponed, come back and bring us stuff you owe us, and then we'll set the public hearing. But you're obligated to set the public hearing.
And certainly, we don't want to do anything that they feel that they weren't treated fairly, because that may come back to us.
But the primary function of the planning commission on the PUD, hold the public hearing required by state law and your ordinance, move it on to the city council. Vote no on the actual plan if you don't like it, but you got to hold the public hearing.
And I think the other point there should be made is that it was relatively quiet today. Since this was not a public hearing, but I can guarantee you in July when these things pop up again, you're going to see a lot more people in here expressing their opinion as to whether or not they like what's going on.
That was it. Thank you very much. Great meeting. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Not a lot of
Good night.
residents.
Have a good evening. Let's go outside and warm up.